Violence shall no more be heard in thy land, wasting nor destruction within thy borders. But thou shalt call thy walls salvation, and thy gates praise. The sun shall be no more thy light by day, neither for brightness shall the moon give light unto thee. But the Lord shall be unto thee an everlasting light, and thy God thy glory. Thy sun shall no more go down, neither shall thy moon withdraw itself. For the Lord shall be thine everlasting light, and the days of thy mourning shall be ended. Thy people also shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever, the branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. A little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in his time.
The ocean spirit dances today to abundance and joy and to eternal peace.
Jake about to live, man. Jake about to truly live forever. And how we gonna tap in? Through this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, which is gonna lead us into eternal life. This wisdom is gonna bring us into the kingdom of heaven, which starts with the elect. And Lord's will, we are those men. This is the book of Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, and verse 17. And it reads, "For the very true beginning of her," and her represents wisdom, "for the very true beginning of her is the desire of discipline, and the care of discipline is love, and love is the keeping of her laws, and the giving heed unto her laws is the assurance of incorruption. Therefore the desire of wisdom bringeth to a kingdom." So this wisdom is going to bring us into the kingdom of heaven, because it starts with the Lord's men. "If your delight be then in thrones and scepters, O you kings of the people, honor wisdom, that you may reign forevermore." You see?
To the glory of our golden age, may it shine forever.
So we're going to reign forever. Lord's willing, we are part of the elect.
Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. And her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of saints. And he saith unto me, Write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, These are the true sayings of God.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rakapadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rakapadash. Pushing to get up out of there. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who may have came back to the obedience of the scripture through faith in Yahweh Bashem Al-Shah. All right. And what I want to get into, all right, with this lesson, another installment of the devil at work. Okay, the invisible government, and I wanted to emphasize on this devil, all right, Edward, all right, Bernays, okay, known as the father of propaganda. Okay, and it makes me want to start. It makes you think of this precept in the book of St. John, chapter 8. Because we know that these devils, all right, they're deep, into the witchcraft and enchantments, all right, and psychology, all right, the manipulation of the minds. Okay, and the scripture describes this man, in that way. Because when you go to the book of St. John, chapter 8, as Yahweh Shai was cursing out these wicked niggas, all right, because of leadership, especially the Sadducees, all right. They was juiced in, with the Roman elites, okay, because they were tasked, all right, to be the puppets, okay, of the Roman government to keep Israel in check, So they was, getting the perks, all right, of these high offices, over Judea. They turned the priesthood, okay, into a political office of the Roman government, okay, and Yahweh Shai was cursing them niggas out, saying, look, y'all niggas are of y'all father the devil. Y'all niggas act like Esau, man. It's basically what he's telling Jake, man. Okay, so when you read it, it's a lot being said. When you go into St. John 8:44, it says, ye are of your father the devil, okay, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, going back to Cain, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, going back to the serpent, he said he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it, man. And this man is a master manipulator, man. Okay, and he has infused so much manipulation in society, so people don't know they left from right, night from day, up from down. Okay, and it's intentionally like that. Okay, he has created such a perverse and backwards and wicked cultural norm, okay, that people don't even know where to begin. You see, and that leaves him free to do all type of wickedness. You see, while people are confused. Now let's get into some of these words first. Let's deal here. All right, it says, well, he's a liar and the father of it. So when you go into the father of something, all right, let's get this word. All right, when you go into the father, okay. So we go into this word, father. All right, in the Greek, which is pater, all right. Greek word is pater.
Strong's G 3962. Pater. Pater.
All right. Now, just to get to the point, it says metaphorically, all right, metaphorically, the originator and transmitter of anything. The originator, okay, or transmitter of anything. You see? So when you go into Esau, he's the originator of lies, okay, manipulation and witchcraft, going all the way back to the serpent. Because when you go to the serpent, all right, how was the serpent described? And we're going to go more into that, okay? Now it says Genesis 3:1, it says, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord power had made. And he said unto the woman, yeah, have the Most High said, ye shall not eat of the tree of the garden. And see, he began with manipulation. Okay, we're going to expound on the manipulation that, all right, the serpent used on Eve. Okay, and he dealt with these Edomites. They come in that same spirit, okay, of their manipulation. You see? So let's get into some words. All right. Let's go here first. Let's go into the serpent. Okay. You go into the serpent. Get this word in the Hebrew. Okay, which you go into the root word. Go into the root word, which is nakash. Okay, in the Hebrew, all right, nakash, all right, which goes into to practice divination, to divine, to observe signs, to learn by experience, to diligently observe, to practice, fortune teller, to take as an omen. All right, so the serpent was into what? Witchcraft, which it wasn't an actual snake, it was a man. Okay, but he had what serpent-like qualities. He was crafty, he was patient, all right, and he struck, at the right moment, all right, to manipulate Eve. which we know that the scriptures is a bridge. When you go into Genesis, a lot of these stories are a bridge, so it doesn't go into that whole process of the serpent breaking Eve down. We know it's more than one encounter. Okay, when you go into it, okay, but the serpent is crafty, waiting for what? The right time to strike. Serpent blends in. Okay, it's very discreet. You see, and those are qualities of Esau, and Esau does that now. Because you go into his his manipulation of today. It's like a serpent. You're getting bit, but you see, you don't even know where it's coming from. You see, and it's quick. We're gonna get into it, but you go into the serpent, it goes into witchcraft, man. All right, it says to divine, to enchanter, an enchantment, a spell. And all this goes into psychology. Okay, all this goes into psychology, man, because there's a left and a right to everything, because there's a way to understand psychology for the embetterment, okay, of people, and then there's a way to go into psychology for manipulation. All right, and we know that this devil, he used it for what? Manipulation. Okay, and even like going back to the garden, into the word subtile, which is that word rum. All right, Hebrew, which goes in what? Subtile, shrewd, crafty, sly, sensible. Okay, shrewd, prudent, which means that he's diligent in his wickedness, man. You see, these devils study hard and long when it comes to witchcraft and psychology for the point of what? Manipulating. For the sake of manipulation. You see, these devils, these college institutions, and all these, these colleges are basically to find the sharpest minds, okay, to pour into his agendas, man. When it comes to marketing, when it comes to, propaganda, okay, what they call public relations. You see, when it comes to certain leadership roles, college, he uses it to sift out the sharpest minds, okay, for these particular roles in society, man. You see, so he spends a lot of resources and time, into being crafty, okay. He's prudent in his wickedness, man. You see, so going from there, and when you fast forward and you jump to Esau, how was Esau described? Okay, you go to Genesis 25. Okay, Genesis 25 and 27 says, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. Okay, and they describe Esau as a cunning hunter. And see, this cunning hunter goes beyond, the ability to, kill, animals. Okay, to kill deers and ducks. You see, which he's crafty with the way he hunts. Okay, in fact, he used manipulation. Esau doesn't use a lot of skill when it comes to hunting. He uses a lot of manipulation. He's very crafty in manipulating what he's hunting. You see? So when you go into hunting, we know when you get to the elites, all right, they are hunting the spirits of men, the souls of men. Okay? That's how they become cunning hunters. You see? Because you go into this word cunning. All right, you get this word cunning in the Hebrew, which is yada. All right, yada, which means to know, to learn. All right, to perceive, to find out, and discern, which he goes deep into this, man. Okay, to know by experience. You see, these devils, they get deep into, okay, this psychology, man. And there's a major part how they control the masses. Okay, it's through psychology. It's why we always go into what? Psyops. Okay, psyops. What is psyops? A psychological operation. Okay, and when you go here, let's get Revelation 18. Okay, let's get Revelation 18. When it talks about what was found in Babylon. Okay. Now this is describing, because it's the merchants of the earth, crying. All right, because Babylon is what, a consumer, nation, in which the nations got wealth, the oligarchs of these other nations, the merchantmen, these corporations of these other nations, got wealth. All right, these governments, the higher ups in these governments got wealthy, off their, the American market of consumerism, so they're lamenting at the destruction of this place. All right, it says, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buy their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones, and the pearls, and the fine linen, and the purple, and the silk, and scarlet, and thyme wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of precious wood, and of brass, and of iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheats, and the beasts of sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and the souls of men. Okay, and the souls of men. Okay, because you go into America, there's no one that's more propagandized, all right, and enchanted than the American population. There's no one that's more delusional and detached from reality, and operating from a position of fantasy and delusion than the American population, man. Because of the constant non-stop propaganda, the psychological operations. And when you go into this word soul, you go into the word soul, and it says slaves, because this is a society where people are slaves to their lust. All right, so you go into this word in the word souls in the Greek. The translation you see here is psyche. Psyche, and in the Greek,
Strong's G 5590. Psyche.
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 Or the translation goes into what? Psyche. All right. Psychology, man. You see? Now, when you go into it, and this is the main definition, it says the seat of the feelings, desires, all right, affections, aversions, our heart, soul, etc. So the seat of feelings, desires, affections, aversions. See, Esau knows how to manipulate the emotions, man. The inward desires, that lust, he knows how to manipulate those things, man. And controls the masses, man. You see? So I want to get into real quick. Then we'll get into the video. I want to get this that I asked the chat real quick. Did the serpent use psychology on Eve? Okay, so you go here. Let's see real quick. Did the serpent use psychology on Eve? Okay. So when you go here, it says, yes, according to theologians and biblical scholars, the serpent in Genesis used highly calculated psychological and rhetorical tactics to tempt Eve. The encounter is widely recognized as a masterclass in manipulation, utilizing several classic strategies of persuasion and deception. Planting doubt. The serpent started by subtly questioning the Most High rules by asking, did the Most High really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? He distorted the Most High's generous allowance into a restrictive, harsh command. Okay. So this devil, when you go back to the serpent, all right, he used manipulation on Eve. You see, he turned one. Here it is. The Most High had Adam and Eve in paradise. Okay, in paradise, man, they didn't have to work. The earth just gave forth abundance, and so, and much more that we don't even know. But they was in a great situation, man. Okay? But what did he do? He came and planted doubt. Okay? As capitalizing on fear, the serpent used a direct contradiction to the Most High's warning, you will not certainly die. This fostered false security and challenged the validity and consequences of breaking the rules, appealing to pride and desire. He attacked the Most High's character by suggesting ulterior motives. For the Most High knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like the Most High. This preyed on the desire for autonomy, wisdom, and self-empowerment. Okay, this preyed on the desire for autonomy, wisdom, and self-empowerment. It was already inside Eve. She wanted autonomy. She wanted this self-empowerment. It was already an inner. The serpent just manipulated, okay, and justified it for it, man. Through witchcraft, man. This was a psyops ran on Eve, man. Okay, this was a masterclass of manipulation. It said the narrative notes that the serpent was crafty. Instead of using force, the serpent engaged Eve in a debate, redirecting her focus from the abundance of the garden to the single prohibition, making it the central focus of her thoughts. So it was all these things that she could do, but he made her focus on the one thing that she couldn't do as a restriction, as if the Most High was all bad. Because of this, man, and he uprooted, he uprooted Eve, and Eve, brought it back to Adam. All right, and here we are, the good old US of A. You see, so I want to go from there. Let's go to the video. Okay, let's go to the video. Yeah, here we go. So let's go here. Play a little bit of. I'm gonna jump around, skip around a little bit in it.
You had breakfast this morning. Maybe it was bacon and eggs. You scrolled through your phone past people you'll never meet, past opinions you believe are your own, but were carefully placed inside your head decades before you were born. You drove past billboards. You watched a product review that was quietly funded by the company being reviewed. You formed an opinion about a political candidate based on a feeling you can't quite explain. And none of this is an accident. Every single one of these moments traces back in some way to one man, a man most people have never heard of, a man who figured out over 100 years ago that the most powerful force on earth isn't money, isn't military strength, isn't political authority. It's the ability to make people want things they never knew they wanted, believe things they were never asked to believe, and behave in ways they think are entirely their own idea. His name was Edward Bernays. He was born in Vienna in 1891. He died in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1995 at the age of 103. And in between, he essentially invented the modern world as we experience it. He is the reason you eat what you eat for breakfast. He is the reason women smoke. He is the reason an elected government in Central America was overthrown. He is the reason corporations don't just sell you products anymore. They sell you identities. And perhaps most disturbingly, he wrote it all down openly, proudly, in plain language, explaining exactly how he did it and why he believed it was not only acceptable, but necessary. He called it the engineering of consent. Others would eventually call it something else, propaganda. Now, to understand Edward Bernays, you first need to understand his family, because his bloodline is the skeleton key to everything he became. Bernays was born in Vienna, the son of Elie Bernays and Anna Freud Bernays. His mother, Anna, was the sister of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. And his father, Eli, was the brother of Freud's wife, Martha Bernays. So Edward Bernays was doubly related to Sigmund Freud, his uncle on both sides of the family. This wasn't some distant, abstract connection. Freud's ideas about the unconscious mind, about hidden desires, about the irrational forces lurking beneath rational behavior, these ideas were woven into the fabric of Bernays' childhood. They were dinner table conversations. They were letters passed between Vienna and New York. And later, when Bernays grew up and entered the professional world, they became weapons. The Bernays family moved from Vienna to New York City.
So you go into his uncle, Sigmund Freud. He was one of those first, and they was, because it said his grandfather. When you go into Edward, all right, Bernays' grandfather, he was a rabbi, small hat, okay, but they was from Austria, which is near Germany, because a lot of those small hats come from Germany, even the Rothschilds. I think Mayer Amschel, all right, Rothschild was from Germany, okay. So you had a population of small hats, in Germany, around Austria, okay. So this his line goes back to small hats, man, and they were deep into what? Psychology, man, okay, which ultimately goes into, all right, the study of the soul, the spirit, what they call the unconscious, okay. So I'm gonna jump up. I said we're gonna bounce around, okay, because the devil really took off when he started to work in politics. And when he seen, how propaganda worked in war, he started to use that propaganda, through peacetime, to sell products and to sell ideas and agendas, okay, and to manipulate the masses, okay, for the sake of profit, and for the sake of control. All right, so let's play this.
All watching, learning, absorbing. When the war ended in 1918, Bernays accompanied the American delegation to the Paris Peace Conference. He saw firsthand how President Wilson was received like a hero in the streets of Paris, how the masses cheered for a leader they'd never met based entirely on messaging they'd consumed through media. And something clicked in Bernays' mind. Entire career. If propaganda could be used so effectively during wartime to rally an entire nation behind a cause, then surely the same techniques could be applied during peacetime. If you could convince millions of people to die for a slogan, couldn't you convince them to buy a product? Couldn't you convince them to change their habits? Couldn't you, in fact, convince them of almost anything? In 1919, Bernays returned to New York and opened his own public relations firm alongside P2 and his.
So you put, okay, a psychoanalysis, and you combine with a feminist. Oh boy, because his wife was a feminist. So remember that. Okay, just remember his wife was a feminist. You see, and he was the father of propaganda. Okay, showing you how the feminist movement was rooted in mass manipulation, man. Okay,
lifelong business partner. Fleischman was a remarkable figure in her own right. She was one of the first married women in the United States to be issued a passport under her maiden name. She was a member of the Lucy Stone League, which advocated for women keeping their birth names after marriage. She ghostwrote many of Bernays' memos, press releases, and even portions of his books. By all accounts, she was an equal partner in everything the firm produced, though history has largely overlooked her contributions in favor of her more flamboyant husband. Together, Bernays and Fleischman set up shop and immediately began applying wartime propaganda techniques to the peacetime marketplace. But Bernays didn't want to be called a propagandist. The word had already begun to acquire a sour taste in the public mouth. So he invented a new title for himself. He called himself a Council on Public Relations. It was a stroke of genius. Public relations. The very phrase sounds benign, almost friendly. It suggests transparency, openness, a relationship between an organization and its public. But what it really meant, in Bernays' hands, was the systematic, scientific manipulation of public opinion for private gain. Same techniques, same psychology, new name. Now, Bernays didn't just rely on instinct or creativity. He drew directly from the theoretical work of his uncle, Sigmund Freud. Freud's central insight was that human beings are not rational creatures. Beneath the surface of our conscious thoughts lies a vast, churning ocean of unconscious desires, fears, and impulses. We don't make decisions based on logic. We make them based on feelings we can't articulate, drives we can't control. Bernays took this idea and ran with it. If people are fundamentally irrational, then you can't persuade them with facts and arguments alone. You have to reach them at a deeper level. You have to tap into their unconscious desires and attach your product, your cause, your client to those desires. But Freud wasn't the only intellectual influence. Bernays also drew heavily on the work of Gustave Le Bon, the French social psychologist who wrote The Crowd, a groundbreaking study of mob psychology published in 1895. Le Bon argued that in crowds, individuals lose their capacity for rational thought and become susceptible to emotional contagion, suggestion, and manipulation. Bernays also studied the work of Wilfred Trotter, a British surgeon and social psychologist who developed the concept of the herd instinct. the idea that human beings have a deep primal urge to conform to the behavior of the group. And he studied Walter Lippmann, his former colleague from the CPI, who had written about the concept of stereotypes and how public opinion is shaped not by direct experience, but by mediated images. From all of these thinkers, Bernays assembled his own theory of mass persuasion, a theory he would codify in two enormously influential books. The first was Crystallizing Public Opinion, published in 1923. It was the first book ever written about the practice of public relations, and it essentially created the profession as a discipline. In it, Bernays laid out his philosophy. The Public Relations Counsel, he argued, was not merely a publicist or a press agent. He was a social scientist, someone who understood the mechanisms of public thought and could shape them deliberately. The book was groundbreaking, and it attracted the attention of corporations, politicians, and governments around the world. But it was his second book, published 5 years later, that would become his most famous and most controversial work. In 1928, Bernays published Propaganda. The title alone was provocative, but what lay inside was even more so. The very first paragraph is worth understanding closely. Bernays opens by declaring that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of the country. Read that.
An invisible government. Okay, that's why these people you see are just puppets. But there's a manipulation, there's a psychological warfare that goes on beyond, okay, a Democrat, Republican. No, them just puppets you see up there. Okay, the true guiding, when the true, all right, rulership is not seen. Okay, and not only it's not because you don't see the elites, but there's a psychological warfare you don't see. You know, 6 and 12 tells us we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Okay, they call it the because when you go into, matter of fact, let's go into that. So I want to get this word. All right, so when you go into the book of Ephesians, chapter 6 and 12, you get a couple of words in there. All right, so you go to the book of Ephesians, chapter 6. All right, the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 12. It said, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Okay, you know, so you can be mad at, you know, Trump or Biden or, you know, whatever, you know, you can be mad at Elon. No, the true force behind this rulership, okay, is the spiritual wickedness that's in high places. Okay, it's the mass manipulation that's embedded into society through the music, the media. Okay, you see, the politicians are just a part of the manipulation, you know, but there's a big system of manipulation that people don't see, and it's infused into everything, you know, and it's infused to the masses, man. You know, that's why people are so manipulative, because it's such a manipulative system that runs this world. As the ruler, so are the people. And you go into, all right, this word rulers. All right, you go into the word rulers in the Greek.
Strong's G 2888, Kosmokrator. Kosmokrator.
Kosmokrator. All right. It said the Lord of the world, the prince of this age. Okay? The Lord of the world, the prince of this age. Esau Edom, man. And he comes in the spirit of who? Satan. The devil. Going back to the devil. He's a liar and the father of it, man. Okay? The prince of this age. You see? So, you know, the people that we see, they're just a part of the manipulation, but there's a manipulation machine that's embedded all into society, man. You know? So this going back to, like you said, it's in the invisible ruler. Okay, the invisible government. See? So let's go back. Back just a little bit.
That would become his most famous and most controversial work. In 1928, Bernays published Propaganda. The title alone was provocative, but what lay inside was even more so. The very first paragraph is worth understanding closely. Bernays opens by declaring that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of the country. Read that again. He's not hiding anything. He's not apologizing. He's saying, plainly and proudly, that democracy requires manipulation, that the masses are too irrational and too easily swayed by emotion to govern themselves, that an elite class of opinion makers, people like him, must quietly guide public thought from behind the scenes. He called this invisible government. Others might call it something far less flattering. Throughout Propaganda, Bernays argues that every aspect of public life, from politics to business to culture to education, is shaped by unseen forces. He describes how leaders, both political and commercial, must understand the psychology of the masses in order to lead them effectively. He doesn't see this as sinister. He sees it as necessary. In his worldview, the alternative to manage public opinion is chaos. Without the guiding hand of the public relations expert, the mob would run wild, driven by irrational passions and base instincts. The engineering of consent, as he would later call it, was not a corruption of democracy. It was, in his mind, the very foundation of it. Now let's talk about what Bernays actually did with all this theory.
So let's fast forward here. I want to go into what he did with the how he manipulated women, smoking cigarettes. Well, cigarettes, nobody should smoke goddamn cigarettes. Okay, ain't gonna be no cigarettes in the kingdom. But just listen to how he put this psychology and this manipulation into play real time. Okay, just an account. So let's play this.
By the late 1920s, Bernays was working for the American Tobacco Company, run by its aggressive president, George Washington Hill. The tobacco industry had a problem. Women, who represented roughly half the potential market, were largely not smoking. It wasn't that women didn't want to smoke. Many did, in private. But a deep social taboo existed against women smoking in public. In some states, it had even been illegal. In 1904, a woman named Jenny Lasher was sentenced to 30 days in jail for smoking in front of her children. In 1908, the New York City Board of Aldermen unanimously passed an ordinance banning women from smoking in public. The stigma was enormous. Smoking was considered unfeminine, immoral, something associated with prostitutes and showgirls. Hill came to Bernays with a blunt demand. How can we get women to smoke on the street? They're smoking indoors. But if they spend half the time outdoors and we can get them to smoke outdoors, we'll nearly double our female market. Bernays didn't respond with an advertising campaign. He responded with a cultural revolution. First, he consulted a psychoanalyst named Abraham Brill, one of Freud's former students and the first person to practice psychoanalysis in the United States. Bernays asked Brill a pointed question. What is the psychological basis for a woman's desire to smoke? Brill's response was telling. Cigarettes, he said, are equated with men. They become, in the female mind, symbols of male power and authority. For women to smoke openly would therefore represent an act of defiance, a challenge to masculine dominance. Cigarettes, Brill concluded, could become what he called torches of freedom. Bernays seized on that phrase immediately. He didn't need to create a desire. The desire was already there. Women wanted equality, independence, the right to move through public space without restriction. All Bernays had to do was attach that desire to a cigarette. On Easter Sunday, March 31st, 1929, Bernays put his plan into action. He hired a group of about 10 young, fashionable women. His own secretary, Bertha Hunt, was the ringleader, posing as a women's rights advocate. Hunt sent telegrams to debutantes across New York inviting them to participate in what she described as a feminist demonstration. The telegram read, "In the interests of equality of the sexes and to fight another sex taboo, I and other young women will light another torch of freedom by smoking cigarettes while strolling on Fifth Avenue Easter Sunday." The women walked into New York's Easter Parade, one of the most visible public events of the year, attended by thousands and covered by every major newspaper. They strolled past churches. They walked alongside well-dressed families, and they lit their cigarettes. Photographers, who had been tipped off in advance by Bernays through intermediaries, snapped pictures. Reporters, who had been told to expect a feminist protest, scribbled notes. The next day, the front page of the New York Times ran a headline that read something like, "Group of girls puff at cigarettes as a gesture of freedom." Not a single newspaper mentioned Bernays. Not one mentioned the American Tobacco Company. Not one mentioned Lucky Strike. The entire event appeared to the public as a spontaneous act of feminist rebellion. It was, in reality, a meticulously orchestrated corporate marketing campaign. In 1923, women consumed roughly 5% of cigarettes sold in the United States. By 1929, that number had already risen to 12%. The trend was already moving. But the Torches of Freedom campaign accelerated it dramatically by transforming the act of smoking from a private vice into a public statement. Within a decade, women smoking in public had become utterly unremarkable in American cities. Lucky Strike's sales exploded, and an entire generation of women were hooked on a product that would eventually kill many of them. Bernays, for his part, never smoked.
You shall not surely die. You shall not surely die. Okay?
The trend was already moving. But the Torches of Freedom campaign accelerated it dramatically by transforming the act of smoking from a private vice into a public statement. Within a decade, women smoking in public had become utterly unremarkable in American cities. Lucky Strike's sales exploded, and an entire generation of women were hooked on a product that would eventually kill many of them. Bernays, for his part, never smoked a single cigarette in his life. He even spent years unsuccessfully trying to convince his own wife, Doris, to quit. But Bernays wasn't content with just selling consumer products.
Yeah, so, the devil, you see how they was able to make it seem like it was just an organic. That's how we know a lot of this stuff we see. A lot of things that we see, are staged. The cameras are there. All these, high definition cameras are there just catching everything. Okay, and it's all for manipulation and control of the masses. Okay, so he turned something that, was looked frowned down, was frowned down upon in society, and turned it into, all right, a symbol of independence, strength, and freedom and liberty. He knows how to spin that word freedom and liberty, man. To your own destruction. Even with the C-hip, he's gonna spin the C-hip like some type of freedom and liberty, man. You see? So real quick, because he's mastered what you call, the mob mentality with his manipulation. So let's go here real quick. When you go to then got a little more I want to play on that. But when you go here to mob mentality, okay. So when you go into mob mentality, also known as herd mentality or crowd psychology, is a psychological phenomenon where individuals adopt the behaviors, emotions, and beliefs of a larger group. It often overrides critical thinking and personal morals, causing the people to act in irrational or destructive ways they normally wouldn't on their own. So if he can show a big crowd doing it, that plays on the psychology of the mass and see with the TV, because that's why now, you can put one celebrity in a certain outfit, and next thing you know, it's a trend because it's being displayed to the masses at the same time. So you see the celebrity wearing it, okay, and then you go to the grocery store, the mall, or the bar, and you see people wearing it. Now it becomes a trend. Now it's developing to a herd mentality. He did that with niggas, the nigga woman, You see one woman dressing like that, acting like that on TV, and then you start to see that in every day. Then it develops into a herd mentality, a crowd psychology, man. People are more comfortable, to do immoral thing when there's a crowd. That's why things are done when you go to places like Freaknik and Black Beach and certain things. You're more susceptible to do more immoral things when you see a big crowd doing it. Okay, and you keep reading. It says understanding the mechanism of group dynamics help explain why this phenomenon occurs. It said de-individualization. Yep. It said de-individuation. All right. When immersed in a crowd, individuals often lose their self-awareness and personal identity. They feel a sense of what is it? Anonymity, making them abandon normal inhibitions and restraints. It says, because everyone in the group appears to be doing the same thing, the moral weight and accountability of the action feels distributed among the collective rather than resting on any single person. Strong emotions like anger, excitement, and fear, all right, spread rapidly through a group via body language and vocal cues, quickly pulling more people into the same emotional state. All right, and we've seen that heavy with the C hip. Okay, we seen that not with the C hip, with the juice. Okay, with the pandemic. Okay, there was a herd mentality, man. You seen a few people with masks on, then next thing you know, everybody had the mask on, man. Okay, the juice came out. All right, they showed you lines of people at the hospital, lines of people lining up to get the juice, and you know, it became that herd, all right, mentality, man. That mob mentality. Okay, and this devil has mastered it, man. He's gonna run that same game with the C hip, man. Okay, so let's go back, and that's why I got this. Let's get this up here. So I'm gonna go to the last few minutes of the video. So it's a pretty good watch. It's some more, you know, wickedness he did. You know, it's about 30-something minutes, but it's a good watch. But let's go here towards the end, let it play. You know, and that's why scriptures say this. All right, Exodus 23:2 said, "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment," man. And also the Bible speaks about righteousness, man, upholding righteousness, even if, you know, the majority is doing it, it doesn't make it right. Okay, but this society, you know, judges based off popularity. You see how many followers you got, how many likes. Okay, your net worth. See, they base, you know, they justify things, okay, based off numbers and crowds and popularity, you know, and public consent. You see, but the scripture deal with righteousness, man. You see, that's why you had even our forefathers, all right, in the ancient world, all right, you go to, all right, the time of the Babylonians, those three Hebrew boys, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, you know, even though the whole kingdom was bowing down, they didn't bow. You see, they didn't bow. They stood for righteousness, man. The Maccabean revolt. A lot of our people was being Hellenized, okay, going out the way of the Greeks, okay, working out, you know, naked, tripping, man. You see, but you had a remnant of our people. They didn't budge, man. They didn't care what the crowds were doing, man. They stuck to righteousness, man. You know, and that's the same type of stance we're going to have to take. Okay, so you let's play the last few minutes of this.
Bernays' influence only grew. By the time of his death in 1995, his methods had become so deeply embedded in the fabric of commercial, political, and cultural life that they were essentially invisible. That was the point. The best propaganda is the kind you don't notice. The most effective manipulation is the kind that feels like free will. Life magazine named Bernays one of the 100 most influential Americans of the 20th century. Larry Tye, who wrote the definitive biography of Bernays, titled it The Father of Spin. And the BBC documentary The Century of the Self argued persuasively that Bernays was the single most important figure in the development of modern consumer culture. Not the most famous, not the most powerful, the most important, because he created the invisible architecture within which all the famous and powerful people operated. Think about what the world looked like before Bernays. Advertising in the early 20th century was crude and direct. Companies told you what their product did and how much it cost. They appealed to your reason. Buy this soap because it cleans better. Buy this car because it goes faster. The assumption was that consumers were rational actors who made decisions based on information. Bernays destroyed that assumption. He proved again and again that people don't buy products because of what those products do. They buy them because of what those products mean. A cigarette isn't a nicotine delivery system. It's a torch of freedom. Bacon isn't a breakfast food. It's a doctor-recommended health choice. A banana isn't a tropical fruit. It's an all-American symbol of modern nutrition. In every case, the product itself was secondary. What mattered was the story wrapped around it. This was Bernays' true innovation. He didn't invent advertising. He didn't invent propaganda. He invented the integration of the two, the fusion of psychological insight with commercial and political strategy that transforms selling from an act of persuasion into an act of identity construction. He taught corporations not just to sell you things, but to sell you a version of yourself. And he taught governments not just to inform their citizens, but to manufacture the emotional conditions under which their citizens would consent to anything. Now Bernays lived to be 103 years old. In his later decades, he semi-retired from active practice and spent time in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where his two daughters lived. His wife, Doris Fleischman, his partner in everything, died in 1980 after a stroke. After her death, Bernays continued to give interviews, write and advocate for the professionalization and, interestingly, the licensing of public relations practitioners. He believed that without licensing, anyone could call themselves a public relations expert, and the field would be corrupted by charlatans. The irony of the father of spin arguing for quality control in the manipulation industry is almost too rich. He remained vigorous and sharp-minded well into his 90s, still giving lectures and accepting visitors at his Cambridge home. A photograph from December 1994, just 3 months before his death, shows him at home at 103, still engaged, still thinking about the future of public relations. But here's the thing that really matters about Bernays.
Yeah, man. You know, so this was the devil, man. All right, Edward Bernays, man, the devil at work. Okay, the father of manipulation. You know, so let's get a few precepts. You know, get ready to close it out. So let's go here to the book of 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 10. Okay, because when you go into this destruction, all this has to be, you see, this is why, you know, the 1,000 years of captivity is necessary, because these heathens have been so enchanted under Esau. You know, this man has, you know, destroyed the minds of the masses. You see, and that's why, you know, the 1,000 years is going to set, okay, a righteous tone in the earth. You know, they got to get broke up from all the madness of Esau, man. Okay. 2 Peter 3 and 10 said, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall be burnt up. Yeah, so part of Esau's works is his enchantments, man. You know, the Lord, when Yahushua comes, he's going to break up. Okay, he's going to begin to break up the enchantments. You know, America will be destroyed. Okay, because America was the platform for all these enchantments that went throughout the earth. Okay, because America, as we went into, you know, America exports its culture more than anything. Okay, American culture is their number one export. You see, through the music, through the media, through the movies. Okay, through art. You see, ideology. Okay. Nah, man, that's gonna be broke up with a rod of iron. And these nations are going to learn righteousness, man. It's going to be a standard. You see, righteousness is going to be the standard in the earth. When the Lord set up the righteous judges, all right, Yahushua and his sons, okay, and the rest of his sons, Yahushua and the first fruits, okay, which are the sons of God. Okay, now when you go to Isaiah 26 and 9, it said, with my soul have I desired thee in the night. Yeah, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early, for when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness, man. You see, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness, man. Okay, and it's going to be through a rigorous captivity. Okay, that these nations are going to learn righteousness, man. Okay, and all this wickedness is going to be broke up. You see, all this pseudo science and, you know, the BS of Esau. Okay, now all this is going to get broke up, and these nations are going to learn a new way, and this is going to be the standard, and it'll never be corrupted. You know, that's why it's going to be an everlasting kingdom. You see, an everlasting kingdom of righteousness, man. Okay, and we're not going to rule with enchantments and Nah, man, we're gonna be straightforward and righteous. This is what it is. This the standard. This the standard, man. Okay? This Isaiah 2:1 said the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And this shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and nations shall flow unto it. Okay? And this is, all right, the mountain of the Lord, which is Mount Zion and government, the Yahushua and the first fruits. Okay? Which that's going to set the standard of righteousness in the earth, man. Righteousness is going to flow down from their government. Okay? So that mountain is going to be the top government in the earth, man. It's going to mean we're going to be far above these heathens. Okay? You know, you compare a mountain, you know, to a hill, man. A mountain is you know, it dwarfs a hill. You see? So we're going to be highly exalted amongst these heathens, and righteousness is going to flow downward in the earth, man. Right now, wickedness flows downward into the earth. Spiritual wickedness in high places. But it's going to be the exact opposite of the kingdom. It's going to be righteousness in high places, man. Okay? That's going to flow down unto the nations. You see? It says, and many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways. We will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall the Lord from Jerusalem. Okay? So these nations are going to be, they're going to be excited. You're not going to have to manipulate them. They're just going to experience righteousness. And one thing about Esau kingdom, it's going to make everybody appreciate righteousness, man. You know, that's why I say, you know, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Okay? There's not going to be a manipulation, you know, the gimmicks and constant psyops. No, man, it's just going to be what it's going to be, the truth, man. You know? And then the earth is going to see the benefits of righteousness, man. And Esau, he's going to be done away with after 1,000 years, man. Okay? But these nations are going to be delighted, you know, after so long in the kingdom. They're going to be delighted because they're going to see righteousness is better, man. You know, especially compared to what they had before, man. Okay, with this guy, man. You see? So I'll leave it there. You know, Lord will. All right, you brothers. All right, and you feel sisters edified. Once again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elder GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessing, salutation, hope, and shalom.